Welcome to Sex Ed with DB. I'm your host, DB. Let's get into it. So you've had pleasurable sex. Yay. But then you get a yeast infection. It's painful, itchy, and a sign your vaginal microbiome could use some support. Happy V creates scientifically sound products to support vaginal, gut, and immune health. Their prebiotic and probiotic is formulated with 7 clinically studied probiotic strains at clinically effective dosages, plus a patented prebiotic to help good bacteria thrive. If you want to support your vaginal health from the inside out, head to happyv.com. Use code SEXEDWITHDB for 15% off your first order, or up to 30% when you start a subscription. That's happyv.com. happyv as in vagina.com. I've been a sex educator for almost a decade, so I know lots about sexy products. Let me share my top 3 reasons I'm personally obsessed with Uberlube. 1, sex feels better while using it, period. 2, it's great for sensitive skin and it's recommended by leading doctors. 3, I don't need to reapply it often because a little goes a long way. Go to uberlube.com and use code SEXEDWITHDB for 10% off at checkout. We're told to do yoga, hydrate, journal, sleep 8 hours, but almost nobody says this out loud. Pleasure is care too. I helped lead a scientific study with more than 1,000 participants looking at daily magic wand use and how it relates to stress, emotional well-being, sleep, confidence, even how connected people feel in their relationships. What we saw was simple. Consistent pleasure can be grounding, calming, regulating. Vibrators like the magic wand are real tools for wellness. If you want to see the findings, go to magicwandstudy.com and give yourself permission to actually feel good. If you've ever thought, I kind of want to try a suction toy, but I have no idea where to start. Hi, this is for you. Lem from Nancy is the perfect first step. It's designed to feel safe, simple, and actually enjoyable to use. No confusion, no intimidation. You can start slow, explore what feels good, and stay in control the whole time. And because it's small, quiet, and super discreet, it literally looks like a lemon, it doesn't feel like this big, overwhelming thing. It just feels fun. So if you've been curious but hesitant, this is your sign. Go to hellonancy.com and use code SEXEDWITHDB for 25% off. Hello, and welcome back to Sex Ed with DB. I'm DB, your favorite sex educator and pleasure expert, and I'm so excited to share this different than usual episode with you. I recently joined Maya Lau on Other People's Pockets to talk about something I don't think enough independent creators talk about: money. In this episode, I share the story of how I got into sex ed in the first place, why I started my podcast, and how this work went from a passion project I was doing on nights and weekends to a real sustainable business. And yes, we get very specific. I talk about my exact income, how much I make, where that money comes from, where it goes, and how I'm able to keep producing Sex Ed with DB as an independent show. We also talk about the behind-the-scenes reality of being a sex educator online, building trust with an audience, working with sponsors, navigating taboo topics, and figuring out how to make a living from work that is deeply personal, educational, and sometimes very strange to explain to strangers, I have to say. Sometimes people are really into it, and sometimes people are like, what are you talking about? How do you even make money? What is your job? I don't get what you do. But if y'all have been listening for a while, you know exactly what this is all about. My hope is that this conversation feels transparent, useful, and maybe even a little permission-giving, especially if you're a creator, educator, podcaster, or just someone trying to figure out how to turn meaningful work into something financially sustainable. If you're an indie podcaster and you're actually interested in hearing more about the resource hub that I talk about in this episode, go to the show notes and check out monetizeyourindiepod.com. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Maya on Other People's Pockets. as a sex educator, I kind of have believed that there's nothing more taboo than sexual health and the way in which that we talk about our bodies and our relationships. But I do think that it ties with personal finance and the way that people view their money, view the way in which that they talk about their salaries, and the way in which we relate to our friends. Like most people, when they first start dating, don't even feel comfortable asking how much their new partner makes or how much they have.
My guest today is Danielle Bezalel. She's a sex educator and small business owner who's the creator and host of the podcast Sex Ed with DB. It's a great show that explores all the things you might wonder about sexuality, bodies, and pleasure, but might be too afraid to talk about openly, all in a science-backed, friendly environment. As I'm exploring building out the business of my show, I was so curious to learn about how Danielle has monetized her content and how she's teaching other indie creators to do the same. After earning her master's in public health from Columbia and working for other people, she was able to quit her day job because she was making such promising money on her own business. It did not happen all overnight, though. Danielle walked me through the process it took to get there and the challenges of making money in an industry where you're often at risk of being shadow banned or of having your social media accounts entirely shut down for having content that gets flagged, no matter how educational it might be. I'm Maya Lau, and this is Other People's Pockets, the show where I ask people how much money they make and how their finances work so that the questions we all have about money can be a little bit less of a mystery. And now, here's my conversation with Danielle Bezalel. Danielle Bezalel, welcome to Other People's Pockets.
Thank you so much, Maya. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you. How are you doing today?
Great. Yeah. Feeling energized, excited. It is blue skies here in Oakland, California. It's going to be a nice day. So I'm thrilled to be able to go frolic outside soon after this.
Nice. Where am I reaching you exactly?
In the Temescal region of Oakland.
Okay. And do you have a little room there that you're in that's a specific podcast studio?
Yes, it is a small, like 5 by 6 or 7 office with all of my vulva and
stuffies.
And yeah, the clitoris stuffies.
So take me through your background, who you are, and how you wound up as a sex educator.
I think it starts when I was younger, when I was little. My mom is now retired. She just retired, but for 30 plus years, she was an OBGYN. And so she would always come home from a long day, from a delivery, and I would always, joke that she would talk placenta over pizza. Like she would always talk about the placenta wouldn't come out, and it was a really tough delivery. There was a lot of blood, and me and my brothers were just like, yeah, we get it. Can we just have another slice of cheese, please? And so we, from a very young age, myself and my brothers were very used to talking about reproductive health and hearing my mom tell stories about her patients, anonymously, of course. And it was really then that I got so interested in periods and sexual health. And of course, I was coming of age and was interested in relationships and kissing and all the sexual acts and all the things that people wouldn't talk about. And I found myself being the friend that my friends came to ask for advice and, talk about their issues or problems or worries. And I just loved that feeling of being the chosen one and being the person who my friends were interested in coming to for advice. And then kind of fast forward to college, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought maybe I wanted to be a teacher because I really loved working with kids and I loved babysitting and I loved all of those milestones and seeing kids go through them. And I went to UC Berkeley in California for undergrad. So I ended up studying film and media and minoring in education. And then fast forward a little bit to the year after college, a little backstory on my family. So my dad was born and raised in Afghanistan, and he has 7 brothers and sisters, and we're Afghani Jews. There are, I believe, somewhere around like 10,000 of us in the world today. It's a very small population. And when he was 13, He and his family were religiously persecuted for being Jewish in Afghanistan. They moved to Israel, and he and his siblings mostly grew up there. And he and three of his brothers moved to America when they were in their 20s. And then his mom and dad and other siblings stayed behind in Israel. So half of my dad's family still lives in Israel and has been there since the 70s when they moved there from Afghanistan. And so I made the decision to go live in Israel for a year and get to know my grandma and get to know my family and learn Hebrew and teach English there for a year. And my teaching cohort and I went on a field trip to a super religious community for a day in Jerusalem as just part of the programming of teaching abroad. And we got to know like the main Orthodox rabbi there. He was like kind of showing us around. He was talking about his traditions and his customs and his family and kind of what sect of Judaism he is, et cetera, even though everyone in the room was Jewish. So like we were all familiar with what was going on. But then he said something that I have never forgotten to this day, and it's why I am doing this work, which is he mentioned offhand that he had 5 daughters, and when they reached the age of 18, they would be married off by the matchmaker, and that they wouldn't learn about sex until they had it for the first time on their wedding night, and that everyone hoped that a mitzvah occurred and that she got pregnant that night. And so he kind of said all of this in succession. And I don't know about you, but I was horrified. I was just like, this is terrible. I can't believe
questions.
Yeah, I can't believe this is allowed. This is like human rights violations. At the time, I was 21, turning 22. And so I had like a lot of anger and heat inside of me. There's like a room of like 50 people. And I was the like first one to like raise my hand, shoot up my hand, just to kind of like speak up about this horrificness. And he called on me and I said, some semblance of like, what the hell? Basically I said like, what if that's not what they want? What if they're not ready to be mothers? What about their consent? Like what if they don't want to get married so soon? And then he just kind of like waved my concerns off with his hand. And he said, that's just how it goes here. Like, next question. So it was that night that I went home and researched public health programs. And I found Columbia's Masters of Public Health with a focus in sexuality and reproductive health, and decided that my life's work mission would be dedicated
to counter that man.
Yes.
Have you ever sent him your podcast?
I don't think he uses the internet. He basically mentioned that those girls don't have access to the internet and they only have access to like old books.
Can I just also just say really quick, it's interesting that he could have just said, and our girls in our society, they get married and we hope that they have a kid early on. Like, it's interesting that he said they don't get to learn about sex.
Yeah.
And the first time they learn about sex is their wedding night. Like, it's just interesting that he felt the need to add that, as if that was a point of pride, the lack of sex ed.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's like a furthering of just this idea, in any extreme religion, Judaism included. I think it goes to show how unafraid men in particular are to share that they're upholding the patriarchy. Like, I think that they are proud of that fact. And like, I think that for Jewish people, like, having kids is a mitzvah. So for him, he's kind of like, this is a good deed that like they're doing for the world. Like, this is what they're meant to do, is like to create more Jews. And so, yeah, it's this interesting thing, because like, as a Jewish person, someone who really identifies with my Judaism, I really feel this tug and this anger. But I really do believe that in any religion, in any extreme, most people aren't going to like what they hear. And most people aren't going to like the way in which that people are preaching in whatever religion that they're preaching in.
So you took that anger to fuel a new path to sex ed.
Yes, I did. Yeah. And so I found Columbia's program, and it was like exactly the kind of program I was looking for. I found a specific professor, shout out to Nicole Cushman, who had the kind of career that I, thought that maybe I wanted one day. Like, she was someone who taught pedagogy of sex education at Columbia. And she was like maybe 5-10 years older than me. And like, I just knew that she was kind of like the person who I was interested in being similar to. And so, yeah, I applied and found out that I needed 2 years of work experience before going to grad school for this program, and ended up working at a nonprofit doing after school programming for at-risk youth in San Francisco for 2 years. And yeah, it was kind of then that I took this class that my work allowed for like a $300 a year stipend for professional development. And I found this class through the Bay Area Video Coalition that was like Podcast Bootcamp 101. And it was like an 8-hour learn how to podcast course. And I was like, that sounds cool. Like the year was like 2016. Podcasting had not, been what it has become now. But I was still really intrigued by it because I'm also a singer and a performer and a musician. I write songs. And so using my voice and performing has always been of interest to me. And so it was in that 8-hour bootcamp class that I created Sex Ed with DB and really came up with the concept of it. And then Trump got elected the first time in 2016. And that made me feel really powerless and sad and frustrated. And I know a lot of my friends at the time, specifically women and queer people, were feeling really scared about their reproductive health and reproductive rights and their queer rights and what that would mean for them. And it felt very much that Sex Ed with DB was a way for me to cope with that. And I started it 9 years ago this month.
Wow. And did you envision it as being a business that could fully sustain you from the beginning?
Certainly not. No.
How old were you at the time that you started it?
I was 24, and I really just saw it as a hobby and a way to enjoy this new medium and something to feel like I was engaging in some sort of activism through this work. And I ended up posting about it on Facebook, which was cool at the time. And, I made a status that was like, hey, I'm thinking about creating this podcast. Here's the mission. I want to talk to Bay Area natives as we try to revolutionize the way we talk about sex. And I had dozens of comments from friends and family and friends of friends who are like, I know an editor. I know someone who can help you with, recording equipment. I know someone who could help you with financing the thing. I want to talk about content. And so, I, along with 10 volunteers and, my mom basically like helped a lot. And just created a GoFundMe to buy what we didn't need, which was $700 worth of recording equipment. And then I created the first season and made $0 and had a blast and felt like I was actually doing something to fight back against the misogyny and the sexism that we were seeing in the White House and that we still see. And that was the beginning of it.
And I love what you do because I think even the word sex ed is something we associate with sixth grade or just being in school and they teach you the basics. But really, sex ed is something that adults need too. Adults need continuously. And one of the parallels that I see with my show and personal finance is that both personal finance and sex are something that you're just magically expected to be good at with very little instruction or no instruction. Like if there's anything else in life that you wanted to be good at, like be a really amazing tennis player or be a really good cook, it would be natural to maybe hire a coach or do it in a lot of different settings, with a lot of different people, with a lot of different ingredients. Like try it a lot, not just be like, oh yeah, I played tennis against 10 people in my life and that's good enough for me. But with sex, it's like, oh, we go off into the world and we're just expected to know what we know and be good at it and enjoy it, and then not really talk about it publicly too much. And personal finance is the same way. It's like even less education. Oftentimes we have no personal finance class in school, and no one really, other than showing you how to use a calculator, no one really teaches you how to do it as an adult.
Completely. Yes. I think it's a good parallel because I totally agree. And I think that they both are almost equally as taboo, which is interesting to think because as a sex educator, I kind of have believed that there's nothing more taboo than sexual health and the way in which that we talk about our bodies and our relationships. But I do think that it ties with personal finance and the way that people view their money, view the way in which that they talk about their salaries and the way in which we relate to our friends. Like most people, when they first start dating, don't even feel comfortable asking how much their new partner makes or how much they have. And so, yeah, I definitely think there are parallels there.
So in those early years of podcasting, you weren't making money. When did you start to make money, and where were those first dollars from?
A year before I moved to New York for graduate school, I had this kind of in-between time where I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I was like nannying for a few months, and that really didn't work out long term, but it ended up working out because I ended up finding this sexual health startup called O.School. And they were really just starting to build an online platform where sex educators would do kind of like live stream education classes. And that really interested me. And I got connected with the CEO and talked to her about coming on to work, like a contractor, basically. Didn't get any benefits, didn't get, any health insurance or anything like that. But I think I was making something like $25 or $27 an hour at that job. And that was like a full-time 40-hour-a-week job. And after I had started working there as like a content and education person, kind of helping them figure out what their website would look like and their social media and, editing some of their past live streams and putting them on the website, things like that. I approached the CEO and I said, how would you like to maybe be the sole sponsor of season 2 of Sex Ed with DB? There's alignment here. We have similar audiences, I'm sure. I was just starting to build the podcast, but knew that I could potentially start making money. I unfortunately have the sales bone in my body. And I think that is helpful for things like this. And so I approached the CEO after working with O-School for a few months and said, what if I gave you, 30-second advertisements or 60-second advertisements on all of my podcast episodes? I think it was like 10 or 15 episodes at the time. What if I put the O-School logo on our main logo of Sex Ed with DB for the entire show? What if I give you some user-generated content? XYZ. I can't remember my exact deal with them, but it was something to that effect. And I said, and you gave me $5,000 for the entire season, and you're the only sponsor that I'll talk about the entire season. And they said yes. And
was it an easy yes?
I don't remember having to negotiate much. I feel like maybe like the deliverables were negotiated, but they didn't balk at $5,000. And that felt really good because it was like, 9 years ago now, 8 years ago. And I remember the hit that gave me, so to speak, of like, ooh, I just closed a deal and like I did that all by myself and I did it for my own business. And I was really passionate about this and felt really proud of the fact that I was able to sell something and be able to pay myself and the team members that I had probably close to $1,000 a person, which is basically nothing. But at the time, it felt like a lot for me to be able to generate that essentially out of thin air. And that was the first deal that I ever made. And yeah, dozens and dozens of deals have come after.
At what point into your show did you start making the kind of money that felt really significant and that felt like there is a world in which I could quit my day job?
So 4 years into making the show, by that point, I had been doing it part-time. And then I had started working full-time at what I thought was my dream job. It was at a sex toy company based in Brooklyn. And I think that I can't remember what they offered me for my salary, but it was something like, maybe it was 120 or 115. Maybe it was 115K, which for me was like beyond what I had ever made at any job. I was 28 years old, and it was for to be the head of content at this sexual health startup. And I was like, oh my God, this is such a reach. This is a dream job. I have made it. And I ended up being at that job for about 3.5 months. And the whole time it was like kind of feeling fishy. I was like, I don't think this is good. Like I kept getting signals that like I wasn't doing the right thing, and it didn't feel like they knew what they were doing, and it just kind of felt like messy. They did a reorg, people got let go, and then lo and behold, I ended up getting let go like 3.5 months into the job. But it really was a blessing in disguise, for real, because that's when I started doing Sex Ed with DB full time. And that was almost 5 years ago. And so I think getting let go from that job really allowed me to bet on myself. And that also was in conjunction with when influencer culture, for better or worse, in this moment, for better for me, was starting to rise. And where creators online, on social media in particular, were starting to monetize their platforms if they had large followings. And I had gotten really lucky and had a really wonderful intern named Leslie Lopez, never forget, she's the best, who worked with me in May 2020 for about 6 months, 6 months to a year. And it was her who was like, we have to get on TikTok. Like, this is the place where people are creating content. And I created a 10-finger challenge of like, put a finger down if your sex ed was X, Y, and Z. Put a finger down if your sex ed didn't cover consent, whatever. And that video went fully viral, and we got like 40,000 followers right off the bat from that video. And so that was the time where I was really able to see like, we have a good following on Instagram. We have a good following on TikTok. I have the podcast. Like, what can I do with this? And that first year that I started doing it was September 2021, was when I first started making some real money.
What is real money?
I would have to go back and look, but I want to say, I mean, it was definitely like tens of thousands of dollars. Can I go back and check? I literally have a spreadsheet that I could look at. Okay, here. September to December 2021. That fall, I made $6,800. And then from podcast ads the following year, from March to July 2022, I made $22,500. So I was kind of like, okay, like something's happening here. Like, I'm really able to make some money.
And when you got laid off from the sex toy company and then you decided to go all in on Sex Ed with DB, how did you float yourself? Like, were you married? Did you have savings? How did you have a safety net?
Great question. So I decided to nanny 15 hours a week. And I said to myself, I'm going to work on Sex Ed with DB for like 30, 35 hours a week. And at that time, I think I was charging like $33 an hour, because this was like Brooklyn, in 2021. And so that nannying allowed me to pay my portion of the rent. I was living with my now husband, then boyfriend at the time. And I think that like if I needed him to float me, he would have, but it never came to that. Pretty much. I don't think it did at all. Because I was making around $500 a week. And I believe our rent at the time was something like $2,200 a month. So my portion was like $1,000. So I was like bringing in $2,000 a month just from nannying. And so my rent and like my food and my health insurance at the time were all covered. So my social ads were when I first got let go, and that was the first fall, and that was $6,500. Then I'm looking at the social ads that I closed from January of that year to mid-September of that year, and that was $51,150. Plus the podcast ads that I got, which were $22,500. So 22 plus 51, we're looking at 73, almost 74K.
Okay, so almost 74K in the first like calendar year that you were really dedicated to your show.
Plus, I have this tab that says other paid projects in 2022. And that was consulting, teaching in the classroom, creating user-generated content, doing selling. I created like a workshop that I would sell the recordings for. And I made $19,773 just from that consulting in 2022. So 70, what did we say? Like 73K plus 20K. Plus I had this is when I started doing long-term partnerships for my business, where I was doing these like 3, 6, 12-month partnerships. And I made $27,500 from that. So if we're adding all of those together, it looks like it was something around like 120 or 130K. Does that sound right?
Yeah. So that sounds amazing, but I have no idea if that is doable for most content creators. Like, are you a miracle story, or are you just a person who, was dedicated? Like, how do you think about that success you had in that first calendar year of really dedicating yourself to your show?
I do think that I'm an anomaly in that I had built this platform of social followers that really impacted my ability to close these sales. If I were just a podcaster with 0 following on social media, I don't think I would have been able to close numbers like that. However, I think that similar to how people feel about dating, I do think a lot of it comes with having confidence. And just if you're confident in yourself and feel like you will close a deal, I will reach out to 100 companies and will close one deal by the end of that. Like, it really is persistence. And so I do think that if folks are out there who relate to this idea of being hungry for this kind of work and being excited by another $2,000 check coming in, like very piecemealing your income together, I think that more people can do it than they think. But I do think it does require some level of chutzpah or confidence.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like it really, that significant money came from the social ads. It wasn't the podcast ads or sponsorships.
Yes, that's true. So even if we're just 2021 was a wash. I made $6,800 for my first few months of doing this. So if we're just looking at 2022, the podcast ad payments were something along the lines of $22,500 just for podcast ads. But when I was doing kind of these longer term partnerships where I included podcast ads plus social media, that's when I started to, figure out that eventually I could make real money doing this. But at the time, because social media and influencing were just starting, the social ads were where I was making a bulk of that income.
Mm-hmm. So how much money does your business bring in now?
So far this year, my business is projected to gross $142,000 roughly. But my hope is that I close more business and that I end up grossing closer to $160,000, $180,000. There is potential for me this year to gross upwards of $220,000 because of a particular deal that I might close. That's very TBD. This deal feels a little less in my control because it's consulting as a podcast ad strategist with another company. And that to me is something new and something I'm very excited by. And there could be a lot of money in it, but there are no guarantees. And it's definitely going to be a lot of work to do it.
Mm-hmm. So let's just say you bring in $200K by the end of this year. How much are your expenses? Like, how much of that is money that you are taking home?
So my main expenses are contractors. So people I pay part-time to produce my show, do growth marketing management, do social media content, etc. I'm projected to spend around $20,000 to $25,000 this year on contractors. Paying for health insurance is something that I do through my business. My health insurance is not cheap. It's something like $5,000 a year out of pocket for like subpar Kaiser insurance through Cover California. And then I also pay for my business bookkeeping and taxes, which is something around $4,000, $4,500 a year. In addition to that, software and travel are probably my two next biggest expenses. So my expenses kind of hover between, $35,000 and $50,000 per year, I would say, for this year. I think typically in past years, when I haven't been, trying to grow the business as much, my expenses have been closer to like 15 to 30K.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, like just theoretically, if you made $200K, then let's just say $50K for expenses. And then there's obviously taxes and everything. So.
Right. And my business is an S Corp. So I am an employee of my business and get a salary and am taxed through my business. And then whatever is, left over in excess, it's kind of like a convoluted tax thing, but I'm basically taxed through my salary through the business. And then I'm also taxed on the excess income that I have through the business that's not through my salary.
There are a lot of advertisers that wouldn't touch sex content or don't kind of want to be associated with that. But you have this niche where you have found sponsors and they like your content. Do you think that helps or hurts you? Like, do you think it's better to be in a very specific niche?
It's a really good question. It's a little tricky because sexual health companies and sexual health content creators alike are limited in that we can't pay for advertising on typical platforms like Meta, like Reddit, like Google. These companies don't allow sexual health companies to promote their services through advertisements because it is marked as sexual services and it is marked as illegal. Despite that, erectile dysfunction companies have no problem. That's another conversation that we could get into. But anything to do with vulvas, no, big no-no.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're scared. So I kind of serve as the conduit to reach potential consumers and customers and clients with my advertisements that I create through the podcast and through social media. And so is it very tricky for me to also be shadow banned and censored and have my content taken away organically on these platforms? You bet. It's really challenging to be a sex educator anywhere, but especially on the internet. Like when I'm talking about pleasure and when I'm talking about vibrators, I have so much more of a likelihood to get my content removed literally from the platform. And I have many times.
And does it say this was removed?
It does.
Yeah.
If it gets removed. And then I get like a flag on my account and then, a warning that my account could be taken away at any time. Like this is real stuff that sexual health educators and sex workers and people on the internet in this field have to deal with. And people do get their accounts taken away all the time. However, do I feel lucky that these platforms kind of allow me to create this content and I get paid in order to reach people with advertisements that these companies in sexual health wouldn't be able to reach otherwise. Yes, I do feel really lucky that I'm able to serve as that conduit.
You also are, as I see it, de-risking by building part of your business as a B2B, like business to business consulting company for other podcasts and even other big companies with a podcast who want your advice on their monetization strategy. Like, if for some reason you just found it too difficult or annoying to deal with the censorship and all that, you do have this other area of your business that you're growing that is not explicitly sexual anything. It's just you're advising on podcast monetization.
Yeah, you should be my agent. Yes.
No, you should be my agent. What's happening?
Well, you just sold my business very well. But yeah, I hear you. And you're right in that I am de-risking. But I think that if I only did, the thing where I was teaching businesses, for example, to figure out their monetization strategy, that wouldn't be as fun. I do love working with indie podcasters, though. It does give me the same excitement to work with independent podcasters because I like teaching them, hey, you should get your money and get your money from these companies. And then them just being able to close a deal is like the best feeling. So like it does feel similar to me being able to teach someone about sexual health content that they
how to
need
orgasm.
to know about. How to orgasm or STIs or how to get checked or whatever it is, compared to teaching indie podcasters, for example, how to close a 4-figure deal. Like that very much, they do kind of equally excite the brain.
If you could pick sort of an example deal that you have done in terms of how much money you make from it, how long it goes for, what kind of company this is that's paying for a sponsorship on your show or across your socials, what does that look like?
What I have honed over the past 5 years of doing this full time is my sponsorship ad package. And essentially what it is it's a 7-page ad deck that shares exactly who I am, that goes over my highlights, where I've been featured, all about my mission. And then I share who I'm currently working with and also past case studies and what have you. And also a 6-month partnership package that I am currently always trying to sell to new brands. And in that partnership package, it includes a bunch of things. Social media posts, podcast ads, exclusivity, and a bunch of other stuff that brands are really excited by. And I'm currently charging $19,000 for that 6-month package. So it ends up being $3,166.67 per month for the brand. And the kinds of organizations that I'm reaching out to really run the gamut of all things sexual health. So abortion care companies, birth control companies, period management companies, anything to do with STIs, testing, vaginal microbiome, you name it. I currently am working and have worked with for the past 5 years, Uberlube, an incredible silicone lube brand that
it does not have anything to do with the car share app.
Correct.
Uber?
They are completely different entities. But yeah, Uberlube, I like personally use them and I've been so excited to be able to work with them for years. I also work with Magic Wand, like the iconic Magic Wand is one of my brand sponsors.
The Cadillac of vibrators.
The Cadillac of vibrators. I've worked with them for over 4 years now. I recently started working with a sex toy company called Nancy. And I also work with a company called Happy V. They do, pre and probiotics for the vaginal microbiome. And so, yeah, it's like if I'm working with, Uberlube, for example, I'm not reaching out to other lube companies because Uberlube has my exclusivity for the year. I've been working with them for a year contract. And so it feels really exciting to just constantly be thinking about what other companies are out there in different verticals that I could work with in order to close this 6-month package.
And so you'll do, let's say they have to pay you $19K for 6 months of what do they get exactly? Is it ads on your podcast, ads on your socials? Is it a certain amount of shout outs, ads? How does that look?
Yeah. So if you want to know exactly every deliverable, I'm going to send you to monetizeyourindiepod.com, which I just launched, which I'm really excited by. It basically it's a very affordable resource hub that I created where people who are indie podcasters and the like can literally purchase my exact ad deck and the template for you to make your own, my exact pitch email. We can do a hard sell later, but this is true. If you want to know every single thing that's in my deck, I did monetize that, and you too can buy that now. But to give you a sneak peek, exclusivity for the time that I'm working with them, and also a limit of 6 total non-competing sponsors throughout that 6 months. So I essentially promise brands that I work with, I'm not going to work with more than 6 brands. My attention isn't going to be, fractured as much as you think it is. Maximum of 6 brands, you're going to have my one-on-one attention in order for us to have calls, make sure we're on the same page about the kind of content that I create, etc. Other deliverables that I'll share, podcast ads, social media posts, and a few other deliverables that, again, monetizeyourindiepod.com if you're interested.
And by the way, I promise that I'm not having you on as an ad in and of itself for you. I'm actually interested in how you run your business and make money. So do you feel like it makes the most sense because of what you're saying with Google, Facebook doesn't allow maybe the vaginal microbiome company to advertise there. So instead they advertise through people like you. Does it make the most sense for you to just continue to get that type of sponsor because they are blocked or they face barriers other places? Or would you also look for Brooklinen or a mattress company? Or is that kind of not even worth it because then you're competing with every other content creator?
There are a few reasons why that strategy wouldn't make sense for me. So number one, Brooklinen isn't interested in aligning themselves with a podcast that has episodes about 20 types of orgasms. Maybe they're trying to reach the same audience, but I don't think that a Brooklinen would want to align themselves with me. And in the same vein, I don't think it would make sense for me to align myself with them because the way that they do their calculations probably for podcast ads is through a CPM model. That means cost per milli, which literally means how many dollars am I going to give this podcast based on how many thousands of downloads per episode they have. And my podcast isn't valuable because of the amount of downloads per episode. It's valuable because of my entire package, because I have 120,000 followers across social, because I have, baked in, spoiler alert, if you want to see the deck, baked in podcast ads is part of my deck. So that's another way that I add value. Instead of dynamic ad insertion, which is an ad is inserted and then it will go away after a number of impressions, I would not be able to make nearly as much money as I'm making now if I did the typical CPM model. And that's why indie podcasters probably are not making as much money as they want to because they're hearing that the CPM model is the only model. But I am living proof that if you just kind of make something up and, use whatever you have to your advantage, what your newsletter, your platform, if you're really good at in-person events, there can always be in a non-smarmy way, there can always be an element of monetization if you believe in the brands that you're working with. If you believe in the kind of content you're creating, you can monetize your stuff without going the traditional CPM monetization route.
Right. And the CPM route is kind of a race to the bottom of all right, so now I'm just supposed to get as many listeners as possible just to make, whatever very small amount per impression. It just seems like it's very low-hanging fruit, not the best way to go about it. And it sounds like what you're saying is you've sort of redefined what value is. You're providing the value of you are an expert. Your listeners, I assume, like to listen to you. You have all these, let's hope, you have all these exclusive deals. Like, the value is not in just sheer numbers. And that's not to say you don't have a big listenership, but it's to say we're not Joe Rogan over here. We're what we are, but that's why the people who love us. And that is actually more important than just sheer numbers.
Exactly. And for indie podcasters listening, or even if you just enjoy listening to this podcast, if you're a podcast listener, most podcasts don't get above, 500 downloads an episode. And that sounds kind of small, but it's really hard to get people to tune in to your podcast consistently and to get those numbers. Sex Ed with DB for a very long time, and still pretty much this is the number, average about 1,200 downloads per episode. And so, if you're looking at that number just by itself, you might think that's not that impressive. However, if you're looking at, the top 10% of podcasters, that's usually the number.
Yeah. I mean, that's really good to know that your show, to know those numbers and then to know what you're actually making. Because I remember, this is somebody who didn't even know what they were talking about, but I left a job at one point and my manager said, "Oh, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to go do?" And I said, "Well, I'm developing this podcast, and then I also have some other work and da 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 da." And I remember him saying something like, "Oh, well, podcast, I can't imagine that was going to make very much money." And I was just like, first of all,
Thank you.
Super Is that a helpful comment to make? But yeah, look at you. And so anyway, I just, I feel like it needs to be known that it's possible. But as you're saying, it does take a sales bone, which you said you have, and not everyone has that. And I truly believe anyone can develop that. But I feel like I hear a lot people saying, "Oh, I just hate to be a salesperson. I feel so gross. I can't sell anything to save my life." There's also just a lot of creatives out there who they just want to create their beautiful thing. And then they're like, where's the money? They don't want to have to do the business side. But What do you say to that? Did you have to grow into your business womanhood?
I mean, I think that both my parents are very entrepreneurial. My mom ran her own OB/GYN practice for over 10 years. My dad owns his own business, and he has for many years. And so I think I just grew up with this idea of if you want to make something happen, you can just try and do it. And not for lack of hard work. Both my parents really find a lot of value and identity in their work. And I can relate to that, to feeling purpose in my work. And so I do think it's kind of in my blood, in my bones to be this way. And at the same time, there were so many failed things that I tried in college and other, I wanted to make a granola business, and that went nowhere. And I, for a very brief stint in college, had this weird internship where I was trying to get people to rent EV mopeds, very strange job, where I was trying to do sales for that. And so I think just having experience doing a few things like that in my youth and in college made me feel excited and prepared to close that first deal with O School when I was 24. And ever since then, truly, I can remember the feeling, and that was almost 10 years ago. And each deal that you close makes you that much more confident that you could close the next one. And so it's really just a repetition thing. The biggest mistake that I feel indie podcasters in particular wanting to make money make is that they think that if they reach out to 5 brands and those brands either say no or don't answer, that, well, they tried. And that's just not enough. Like you don't have
enough data. It's a numbers game.
It's a numbers game. And you really have to like put on a different, I call it my sales fedora. Like, I'm putting on my sales fedora and just like being a silly different version of myself. And like you set an alarm and you put on the lo-fi beats or like put on Bad Bunny, like whatever pump up music, and you just do it for an hour where you're just cold emailing 50 brands in one day. And that's really like the only way that you can get to a maybe. And that's the only way you can get to a yes.
Is there a world in which this can make passive income for you if you decide you don't want to do this anymore, but the episodes are just still out there in the world. People are listening to them over the years. The content's still out there. It's still evergreen, even if someone listened to it 30 years from now, potentially.
Yeah. It's a great question. I think that I haven't necessarily thought of that for the podcast, but doing this new thing where I'm like consulting with other indie podcasters, and I just launched this website and I have, pre-recorded content in there that will be hopefully a source of passive income. And I don't know. I'm not really sure how I would make the podcast a source of passive income. I think the only way I would be able to do it is by reaching out to old brands and saying, X number of years have passed since we first engaged in this project together, and I will keep your ads in there for the next 5 years if you pay me this fee. That's pretty much the only way that I could see myself getting passive income. Alternatively, in the future, if I reach 1 million downloads, in a few years or something like that, maybe a network would want to buy my brand and buy my content. And at that point, I might be interested if it's something that I'm interested in pivoting to a different thing, or if I'm consulting, or if I'm not, interested in doing this. Because after 9 years of creating Instagram content, I can tell you, I don't want to do that for the rest of my life. It can feel like a challenge sometimes, frankly. So I'm not really sure. I'm going to have to see like what the opportunities are in the passive income space for this business, but TBD.
What do you indulge in financially?
Food. I definitely love eating at restaurants, and like getting sometimes like omakase, like fancy meals out occasionally. Feels very exciting to me. Traveling is a really big one. Multiple times a year, pretty much like every other month or every third month, I'm probably flying somewhere.
Cart to cart, what is something lingering in an online shopping cart that you want to buy, you're not sure if you should buy, but it's still there just in your cart in case you do click purchase?
I don't really have like random stuff that's lingering, but if it were to be anything, it would probably be like a flight that like is in my, like Chase travel thing that I haven't purchased yet or something like that. But I did just purchase the flight that had been in my cart yesterday.
Okay. To where?
To St. Thomas.
The island?
The island, yes.
In the Caribbean.
Yes. My friend has, her family has a house in St. John. And so I'm going to be flying.
Casual.
Yeah, I know. It's really awesome to have friends with resources. And very excited to go. That'll happen in September. And we'll take a ferry from St. Thomas to St. John, the only way, in my understanding, to get there.
And, how much did that cost?
Per person, because I used some Chase points, it was something along the lines of like $430 a person.
Round trip.
Nice. Yeah, points really were helpful.
What does enough look like to you?
Enough looks like what I have right now. Enough looks like being able to save monthly in my 401k and to put a few $100s a month in my Betterment investment accounts. It looks like being able to go on vacation and eat out and work 30 hours a week and make the kind of money that feels comfortable to me when I look at my bank account. It looks like me potentially having big expenses to pay and being able to pay for them without stressing about money. Ultimately, enough feels like feeling like I'm in control of my finances and aware of what I'm spending and what I'm saving, and feeling good to neutral about where I'm at in life financially.
What about enough just in a life sense? Not necessarily financially.
Enough looks like being happy in my marriage and in my relationship and laughing with friends and connecting with my parents and my siblings and writing music and singing and being able to continue to do work professionally that I really believe in, that I hope is changing the world or at least a few people's lives for the better. And it looks like feeling confident and happy in who I am and where I am in my life.
I mean, it seems like you do have enough.
I think I do. I think that my anxiety sometimes makes me feel like I need to keep striving and keep going. And I think that is also coupled with the culture of living in the Bay Area and having very ambitious, resourced people around me. And sometimes that can feel like it can creep in, but more often than not, I definitely feel like I have enough and I'm content and happy with where I am.
Well, Danielle, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for being on Other People's Pockets.
I am honored. Thank you so much for having me.
Other People's Pockets is written, hosted, and executive produced by me, Maya Lau. Kristen Torres edited this episode and provided booking and research. Thank you to Pushkin Industries for past production support. Please follow or subscribe to Other People's Pockets on your platform of choice, write me a review, and check out the video version on YouTube if you're only listening to the audio. Email me with guest ideas, questions, or other suggestions at otherpeoplespockets@gmail.com. And fill out the listener survey for the show at the link in the show notes or at mayalau.com/survey. I'm reading every response. See you next time.